Greetings to all C3RF members and friends across Canada, indeed around the world, and a special welcome to the folks at Veterans for Freedom on their dedicated streaming channels as they view this video summary of the C3RF update for 14 March 2025. The title of this update is Mum's the Word, and it kicks off by noting that the idiom, mum's the word, has been a facet of the English lexicon for some time now. It first made its appearance in William Langland's poem The Vision of William Concerning Piers Plowmen in the 1370 to 1390 time period. The masterpiece contrasted the nature of the aristocracy with the day-to-day realities of a largely voiceless proletariat class. It spoke of a mum whose silence stood as an impenetrable wall until palms were greased. The expression can also be seen to be derived from the Christmas tradition of mumming that involved motley disguised groups that households were obliged to host. The mummers were only allowed to converse through humming and were afforded the opportunity to indulge in lighthearted mockery of their hosts even as they played tricks on them and swindled them out of coins in crooked gambling games. One cannot help but see a parallel between the mummers of yesteryear and our own ruling classes in the present day. After all, don't both share a common advantage in being allowed to operate with impunity as they swindle coins? In the mummers' case, this impunity is a result of householders perceiving a need to respect the religious traditions of the day. In today's political context, the impunity bequeathed our elected representatives is the result of a long tradition of mutual trust built up over the decades and centuries of a working representative democracy. Unfortunately, the high trust societies that made mumming a safe Christmas pastime and jolly old are on the wane today. One can only imagine the havoc that would be created by allowing folks disguised with masks into your home during the 12 days of Christmas in today's Canada. After all, didn't the Toronto Police recently advise householders in that fair city to leave their car keys outside the front door to prevent gangs from breaking in to retrieve them? Canadians may be more than a little reluctant to allow mummers into their homes these days, but unfortunately, they still seem to be okay with allowing the mummer tradition to live large in their day-to-day politics. When it comes to the silent treatment, for example, we see it operationalized in both the transmission and reception of communications from our ruling classes. Case in point might very well be the Canadian government's conduct during the Wuhan virus pandemic when, according to the interim report of the National Citizens Inquiry on the emergency, responsible authorities failed to accurately portray the safety record of related mRNA vaccines. Indeed, it noted that no public authority went out of its way to tell Canadians that their, quote, safe and effective, unquote, shots had not undergone any traditional attempt to prove their safety. This silent treatment, however, would not be limited to this one instance. Mum's the word was the government's order of the day on numerous files. Indeed, mum seems to be the word of the day for authorities who are more than happy to keep essential information from those they are sworn to serve. It's as though they have determined we need to be treated like mushrooms that are cultivated in the dark and fed excrement. We are now seeing such a strategy play out on a major, even existential file of the day, including the tariff wars that stand to confound the Canadian economy. One would think that such consequential developments would demand that any mitigating options would be open to full-fledged debates inputted by all Canadian citizens through their elected representatives. Rather than this, the government of the day has chosen to mute the people's voice by proroguing Parliament. It would appear that Liberal Party politics and politicking rule the day and take priority over any meaningful discussion of how the country might address the potential collapse of its economy. The muting of the voices of those who represent the good people of Canada provides our ruling classes a monopoly on the tariff narrative. This was seen to be the case immediately after the declaration of across-the-board 25% tariffs by the Trump administration on 4 March 2025. What else to think as Prime Minister Trudeau on the same afternoon announced that Trump's, quote, dumb idea, unquote, was designed to break Canada's economy so it could be more easily annexed by its southern neighbor. Controlling the narrative in such a one-sided fashion certainly makes it easy to move the argument away from any fact-based analysis to one that is full of emotion and bluster, but who benefits? It's hard to see how such a strategy could do anything more than provide the demagogues with a momentary boost at the polls. In the meantime, the tariff wars only stand to escalate out of control with Canada's economic prospects pancaking in the process. a true disaster that could have been avoided by displacing emotion with critical thinking. The fact that Trudeau is misrepresenting the rationale for U.S. tariffs is plainly the case when one simply consults the related animating executive order. This order, dated and signed on 1 February 2025, cites the American International Emergency Economic Powers Act and the National Emergencies Act as justification for the tariffs in the face of an ongoing and, quote, sustained influx of illicit opioids and other drugs, unquote. The tariffs are meant to deal with a transnational drug emergency that is having profound consequences on the United States and even threatening the very social fabric of that country. In fact, the ask that the executive order makes on Canada is to take action on its own intelligence from the Financial Transactions and Reports Analysis Center, or FINTRAC, that notes, quote, heightened domestic production of fentanyl, largely from British Columbia, and its growing footprint with international narcotics distribution, unquote. For whatever reason, responsible Canadian authorities would much rather play the mummer, go silent on this ask, and keep Canadians down on the mushroom farm. The fact that the American fentanyl ask is rooted in the truth is not just evidenced by FINTRAC findings. Indeed, hard-nosed digging by investigative journalist Sam Cooper corroborates FINTRAC's conclusions while going further to identify possible collusion by our own mummer government authorities. Mr. Cooper makes some serious allegations that would cause all Canadians to stand up and take notice, if they're only made aware of them by their formerly free and impartial media. These aspersions, however, are not likely to have slipped the attention of American security authorities and, by extension, President Trump himself. They include the possibility that Canada's political leadership itself is involved with turning a blind eye to transnational drug running and money laundering activities. This being the case, as they are only considered to be allegations at this point, we begin to see the contours of a Canadian government that is not only seized with keeping its citizens in the dark and feeding them excrement, but one that is in tune with the mummer's propensity to swindle coins. Unfortunately, when it comes to the possibility of mumming through going silent on the facts and swindling coins from the public purse, the tariff situation is not a one-off. One could look to Canada's approach to the Ukraine-Russia war, for example, for where the mummers are fully engaged. The fact pattern in this matter, for instance, is fatally flawed by the absence of any historical context. Gone is the fact that NATO has been encroaching on the borders of Russia since 1990, when it promised through U.S. Secretary of State James Baker that it would not expand eastward, quote, 1 inch, unquote, to assuage the concerns of President Gorbachev. NATO would then go on to basically double its membership, fail to hold up its end in 2 Minsk peace agreements, and then open the door to Ukraine's membership in NATO to the extreme chagrin of Russia, which saw the last measure as an existential threat. In the Canadian sense, these actions, combined with the unaudited transfer of some $20 billion in aid, munitions, and equipment to Ukraine, would make a mummer squeal with delight. It is interesting to note that the fact that authorities, agencies, and institutions are involved in swindling coins is much more than a possible national pastime. To the south of us, we see news reports on the independent media outlets, of course, identifying as much as $20 billion in climate change funds being rushed out of government coffers into the hands of non-government organizations on the eve of Trump's takeover of the Oval Office. This should ring a bell for Canadians who wonder, after many, many months out of the news, about their own green slush fund. Recall that Parliament has been crippled since last fall, with the Liberal government refusing Speaker of the House orders to hand over unredacted and related documents to the RCMP. Just another case in which vital public information is withheld as allegedly coins are swindled from the public purse. Would it be too much of a stretch to say that Canada's Parliament is a mummer's paradise? In closing, a reminder to join us at CanadianCitizens.org, where you can see this update in its full glory, including all of the links to all of these cited documents. Simply go to the News tab at the top of the page and select C3RF Member Updates from its drop-down menu. Until next time, this is Russ Cooper signing off, wishing you and yours much happiness and freedom from C3RF.